I started sleeping with dogs at the age of 16. My name is Amanda, and this is my story. A story I wish I never told anyone, but I can't keep hiding. Everyone needs to learn from my story. If anyone told me that I would be sleeping with dogs just to make money at the age of 16, I would not believe that. But it happened to me. And this was how I found myself in this situation. I was born into a very poor family in Lagos. When I say poor, I mean very poor. My parents were struggling to eat, including me. I was the only daughter and child. My father was a security guard. He was paid a small amount, and my mother stayed at home with me. I stopped going to school because they couldn't continue to pay my school fees. Hunger was our fourth person in the family. It dealt with us like an army. But sadly, my father died. He died right at his work post. He could not bear it anymore. My mum cried and cried. I cried even more. After my father was buried, my mother was not the same anymore. She fell sick and died too. I became an orphan. My uncle took our small property, claiming he was the rightful owner, and I was left in the streets of Lagos, sleeping under the bridge, inside the gutter, just to survive. Life was dealing with me. I suffered. In fact, I did all kinds of quick jobs like breaking firewood and many more. It couldn't help me. Sometimes I prayed for my late parents to come and take me. But all these things changed one evening. I was selling my last orange, ready to go back to sleep under the bridge again. A black car came and parked in front of me. It was raining that evening. A lady came out of the car. Her name was Cynthia. I thought she was coming to buy oranges. "Why are you sitting alone in the rain? It's late already," she says politely. I told her I had nowhere to go. I told her that I slept under the bridge. Then she offered to take me to her place, but I rejected because Lagos was a scary place. You can't trust anybody. "Do not be afraid. Come with me. I am not a bad person," Cynthia says to me. Then I followed her. She gave me food at the house. She bought new clothes for me. For once, I felt like I was in paradise. I am enjoying the good things of life now. But after a week, Cynthia came with a totally different topic. She sat me down and told me, "I have been good to you, but you need to start making money just like I do. Can you work?" Cynthia says. "Yes," I answered. "I can do anything for you." Then Cynthia told me about the job. "They are going to pay you plenty of money. You will become rich. They are my clients. They don't like women, but they need the women to play with their pets," Cynthia says. I didn't understand at first. "Play with their pets?" I asked. "Yes, play with their dogs, like to satisfy their dogs," Cynthia says clearly. Immediately I dropped the juice I was drinking, pouring it on the ground. Immediately I felt like I was sitting with the devil. "Never, never, Cynthia. So this is how you make your money." "I would never sleep with dogs just to make money," I scream at her. "If you sleep with their dog for one night, you will become rich. Think about this. You are an orphan, no father or mother, just one night," Cynthia says to me. "I will never sleep with dogs just to make money," I screamed at Cynthia. "So this is what you do to make money." Cynthia saw my anger and she laughed. "You are not a child anymore. I can't keep feeding you. I picked you from the street and gave you a good life. Now it's your turn to help yourself. One night, Amanda, just one night." I looked at her. I was burning like fire. "I would rather die than to make such a business. I am just 16. It is a sin," I shouted at Cynthia. "Poverty is the real sin," Cynthia replied. "I will go back to my poverty," I replied. I dropped the glass cup in my hand, and I began walking out of the room. I was willing to go back into the streets of Lagos again. She saw me going and she didn't even ask me to stop. Rather, she was smiling. I was scared. I walked faster out of Cynthia's compound. I left. Yes, I left the paradise I was enjoying in her house and I went back to the streets. I can't sleep with dogs. 3 days after I left her house, I began to sleep under the bridge again. Hunger began to deal with me again. This time it was even worse than the first because I had already tasted a good life at Cynthia's house. The food and clothes she gave me, I got used to it, and now going into the street again felt like hell. I decided to go meet Auntie Debbie, my mother's sister. I told her I had nowhere to go. She sat me down and gave me food, but she wouldn't allow me to stay with her. "Amanda, you are big enough to take care of yourself. You need to go. You can't stay here with me," Auntie Debbie says. I ate the food and left. At least she even gave me food. Night came and I went under the bridge to sleep, but there were other people under the bridge too, and some were men. That night, I didn't know what came over them. They wanted to rape me. I ran away from the boys and went deep inside the street. I didn't even know where I was going. I later slept behind a tree. The next morning, I realized that Cynthia was right. I needed to start making money for myself. I could not take the suffering anymore. I needed to call Cynthia. I walked to a woman to borrow her phone to call Cynthia. She gave me her phone and I brainstormed Cynthia's contact from memory. The phone rang and Cynthia picked up immediately. I spoke sadly. "Cynthia, it's me. It's Amanda. I'm ready to do the job. I'm ready to sleep with dogs if that would take my suffering away." I ended the call after saying that. I cried because I knew I just made a bad decision. The day I was born, I never believed that I would start sleeping with dogs, but there was no other choice for me. The worst part was that there was nobody to advise me or tell me what to do and what not to do. My parents were already gone. I went back to Cynthia's house, and the next morning she told me that I made the right decision by taking that dog business. "You will not regret it," Cynthia says. She told me that after today my life would change for good and my suffering would be gone. I smiled, but the smile was not real. She gave me food and told me to get ready because tomorrow she would be taking me to her clients who would pay me to stay with their dogs. I ate the food and slept. Then the next morning she woke me up and gave me a dress, a very short dress. I followed her to her car and she took me to a location, a well-built mansion. It was not just a mansion. It looked like a museum, but not a museum. There were tall men standing and guarding the gate. Cynthia spoke with the men and they opened the gate for us. We drove into it. Then we entered the main building. It was a very big and confusing place to be. We went to the living room where a man sat like a king. Then 2 other men sat beside him. Cynthia went ahead and began speaking with the man. I could clearly hear them. "This is the girl I told you about," Cynthia says to them. "Is she ready for the job?" "Yes, boss, she is ready." "Do you think your dogs will like her?" "Ah, she looks young and beautiful. This is exactly what the dogs want," the man replied. Then Cynthia made a sign for me to come forward. I came with fears. The man looked at me for a while. "Turn around," he commanded. And I began turning around. He laughed and told his guard to get me ready for the night. "Take her away, my dogs are already hungry," he says. Then 2 men came and took me by my arm. I looked at Cynthia and she said silently, "Go, girl." The men took me to a room that was empty, just a bed, alone. They removed my clothes right in front of my eyes, making me naked. I thought they wanted to sleep with me, but no, they didn't. They left me and went out of the room. I sat alone with no clothes. Then, suddenly, the door opened again and 2 dogs walked into the room. 2 big American dogs. The door closed right away, and I was alone with these hungry-looking dogs. They were licking their teeth as they stood in front of me. I tried to calm myself by thinking that these were just animals. How could dogs do such things? They're just animals, not smart enough to do what these people wanted. But then the door opened again. 3 older men came into the room. They were all big enough to be my father. My heart started beating very fast as they looked at me. "Hey, don't be scared," one man said. "We won't touch you at all. It's our dogs who will do the work. We just watch it happen." That's when I understood why they paid people so much money to be with their dogs. These men wanted to watch their dogs, and that made them happy. I was shocked and asked them, "So all you want is to watch your dogs? You spend millions of dollars just for that?" The 3 men laughed loudly and said, "Yes, you're right. Money is not a problem for us. Now stop asking questions and do what you came here to do." I tried to stay calm. I had never been with anyone before, and I knew this would be the worst night of my life. But I also knew that after tonight I would never have to worry about being poor again. The men came closer and held my arms. They made way for their dogs to come to me. I cried harder than I ever had before. My screams were so loud they could probably be heard far away. I was surprised that the dogs seemed smarter than I thought. They acted in ways I didn't expect. When they were done, someone opened the door and the dogs left. The men stayed with me. One of the men asked me, "How was it?" I was lying on the floor like a log and couldn't answer him. I said, "How was the first time? Answer me," he shouted. I managed to reply because he was getting angry. "Sir, it was fine," I said. "Don't say that next time," he told me. "You should say it was delicious." I nodded and repeated what he wanted. "It was delicious, sir." The men all laughed together. As they were walking out, the last man said, "Call us boss, not sir. We are your bosses now." I quickly replied, "Yes, boss," not wanting to make them angry. They left me alone in the room. It was night time, so I fell asleep right there on the floor. When I woke up in the morning, I saw how messy I looked with blood all over me. I quickly used the bathroom next to the room to clean myself up. I thought I was done with the job. I didn't know it was just the beginning. I sat in the room waiting for them to let me go and pay me my money. Then 2 guards came and opened the door. I stood up, ready to leave. "Sit down there, sit down," they shouted at me. I quickly moved back and asked, "Please, I already did the job. What else do you want?" One of the men answered, "You have to feed the rich dogs their morning food," and then they left me alone again. I sat down and started crying. I knew the dogs would come back this morning. I wondered what terrible thing I had gotten myself into. They brought the dogs to sleep with me again that morning. This time it wasn't as painful as last night. It was easier, but I still felt hurt. After that, they left me alone in the empty room. I didn't even have my clothes on when the door opened again. I was scared, thinking they were bringing the dogs back for a 3rd time, but it was Cynthia who opened the door. When I saw her, I felt so relieved. I knew she came to take me home. "Get dressed, we're leaving. Your job is done," Cynthia said with a smile, but I couldn't smile back. What happened with the dogs was too awful for me to feel happy. She took me out of the room to meet the men who owned the dogs. They paid Cynthia. I watched them send money to her account. "This is for your girl. My dogs really enjoyed their time with her. We can't wait to have her here again," one man said, looking right at me as he spoke. I gave a fake smile and looked down at the floor. In my head, I thought, I will never come back here again. Cynthia and I left the big house. She drove me in her car straight to the bank where we took out some money. Then we went to Cynthia's house. We sat on her couch and she started talking. "The man gave me 5 million naira to give to you." I was shocked. 5 million just for one night with the dogs. "How do these men make so much money?" I asked. Cynthia laughed. "This is just the start. The more you do this, the more money you'll make from them." "No, Cynthia, I'm not doing this anymore. I'll use the 5 million to start a business," I told her, but she kept trying to convince me. She wanted me to sleep with the dogs again. I kept saying no, but she kept saying 5 million wasn't enough money, and that it wasn't new to me anymore. I didn't know that Cynthia had never slept with the dogs herself. All she did was bring girls to sleep with the rich men's dogs while she got paid for finding the girls. I thought she did the same work, but she was actually their partner. She gave me the 5 million in cash and told me to rent an apartment and buy things for it. I did exactly what she said. I got a new place and bought a bed and everything else I needed for that whole week. I wasn't poor anymore because I still had money from the 5 million. People in my neighborhood wondered how I changed so quickly and how I could afford a new apartment. They thought I would keep suffering after my parents died. But by the weekend, all the money was gone. I spent it on clothes and my new house. I promised myself I wouldn't do the dog business again. So I used the little money I had left to open a small shop in front of my apartment. But my business wasn't doing well. No customers came to buy anything from my store, and I was becoming poor again. The shelves in my small shop remained full of items that nobody wanted to buy. Every day I would sit there hoping someone would come in, but very few did. I started to worry about how I would pay next month's rent or even buy food for myself. The money that had seemed like so much was disappearing quickly. I tried to be careful with what I had left, but bills kept coming. The electricity needed to be paid. I needed to eat. Everything cost money, and I wasn't making any from my little shop. The fear of being poor again started to creep back into my mind. I remembered how it felt to go to bed hungry, to wear the same clothes day after day, to feel ashamed when I couldn't afford basic things. So I felt I had no choice but to call Cynthia again. I told myself this would be the very last time I'd do the dog business. I picked up my phone while shaking hands and called her number. Each ring made my heart beat faster. When she answered, I could almost hear the smile in her voice, as if she had been expecting my call all along. I tried to sound confident when I told her I would do one more job, but my voice trembled. I knew you'd come to your senses. This is real business. Imagine making that much money every night. In 1 week, you could be super rich, Cynthia said on the phone. Her words painted a picture of wealth that was hard to ignore. She described the fancy cars I could drive, the beautiful clothes I could wear, the respect I would get from everyone who saw me. The way she talked made it sound so easy, just a few hours of discomfort for a lifetime of luxury, but something inside me still felt wrong about it all. I didn't want to be known as the girl who did these things with dogs. I wanted to be respected for good reasons. I know, but I can't keep sleeping with dogs my whole life. This is just the last time I'll do it, I said, and ended the call. The next morning, Cynthia came and took me to the men again. They were called the dog family. We entered the big house through the same gates as before. Everything looked the same, the fancy garden, the shiny floors, the expensive furniture. But this time it felt even more scary because I knew what was waiting for me. The men were sitting in the large living room, drinking from crystal glasses and laughing about something. They stopped talking when they saw me walk in with Cynthia. One of them, the oldest with grey hair and cold eyes, smiled at me in a way that made me feel sick. Cynthia spoke to the men with confidence like they were old friends. "She wants to do another job," Cynthia said. She sounded proud, as if she was doing me a favour by bringing me here again. The men looked at me with hungry eyes, not much different from their dogs. "She's here at the right time. My dogs really missed her. They can't wait to be with her again," the boss said while I stood with my head down. I couldn't look at them. I felt so small and helpless in that moment, like I wasn't even a person anymore, just something for their entertainment. The guards took me to the room where the dogs would sleep with me again. There were 2 guards, both carrying guns. They walked on either side of me down the long hallway. Their faces showed no emotion, as if they were just doing another day's work. The room looked exactly as I remembered. Plain white walls, a mattress on the floor, a small bathroom attached. They both left, but one came back and opened the door. He was younger than the other guard, maybe in his 30s. He looked around nervously before speaking to me in a quiet voice. He looked at me and asked, "Why did you come back to this place?" His question surprised me. Nobody had asked me that before, not even Cynthia. Nobody seemed to care about my reasons or my feelings. "I needed money," I answered simply, because it was the truth. What else could I say? The guard shook his head slowly, looking disappointed. "You were paid 5 million last time. That should be enough to start a new life. Do you know the danger you're putting yourself in?" the guard asked. His words made my stomach feel tight with fear. I didn't understand why he was acting like he cared. Was this some kind of trick? Why would one of their own guards try to warn me? "Do you care? You work for these men too, so you're no different from them," I said, feeling defensive. Maybe he was testing me to see if I would try to run away. The guard looked hurt by my words. He stepped closer to me and spoke even more quietly. "Lower your voice," he whispered, looking around nervously. "I don't like this job I'm doing. I can't even quit because they'll find me." "That's why I'm telling you the dog business is more dangerous than you think," the guard said before leaving. He closed the door quickly behind him, and I heard the lock click. His warning echoed in my mind. What did he mean? What happened to girls who worked for these men? Was there something worse than what I had already experienced? I remembered how Cynthia had never done this herself, only brought other girls here. Maybe she knew something I didn't know. Maybe there was a reason she stayed on the outside of it all. I sat there alone, feeling scared. What the guard said was disturbing me. What danger was he talking about? I thought all I had to do was sleep with the dogs and leave. What danger could there be? The room felt colder than before. Every sound made me jump, footsteps in the hallway, voices from somewhere in the house, the distant barking of dogs. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to feel less afraid. I thought about running, but where would I go? The doors were locked and the guards had guns. Even if I escaped this house, these men had money and power. They could probably find me anywhere. My mind raced with terrible possibilities. Did they hurt girls who tried to leave? Did they make them disappear? Was that why the guards seemed so afraid? I remembered how easily they spent millions of naira. People with that kind of money often had connections everywhere, with police, with government, with anyone who could be bought. I sat waiting for the dogs to come to me. I promised myself this would be my very last time doing business with these people. If I survived this, I would find another way to live, no matter how hard it was. I would rather be poor than afraid for my life. I sat there waiting for the dogs to come and have sex with me. This would be my last business with them. I promised myself that I would never step foot into this building after today. I was beginning to think these people could be more dangerous than they seemed. What exactly did the guard mean by his warning? What happened to the girls who came here before me? I felt a chill run down my spine as I considered possibilities I hadn't thought of before. Maybe they didn't let girls leave once they knew too much. Maybe the money was just a trap to get us involved in something we couldn't escape from. The room felt smaller now, the walls closer, the air harder to breathe. I tried to calm myself by thinking about what I would do with the money. Perhaps move to another city where nobody knew me, start a real business, maybe even go back to school. But the guard's worried face kept appearing in my mind, his whispered warnings echoing in my ears. I glanced at the door, wondering if I could somehow escape before anything else happened, but I knew there were guards everywhere, probably cameras too. Running now might be more dangerous than staying. A few minutes later, the dogs came inside the room, hungry and ready for me. The men also followed and made it easy for the dogs to do as they pleased with me. After a few minutes, it was over. The dogs walked away happily, their appetite satisfied, while I lay there feeling used and broken. The men looked at me with those same cold eyes, not seeing a person, but just something for their entertainment. "You'll stay inside until evening," one of them said, his voice casual as if discussing the weather, "because you still have to go one more time with the dogs before you get paid." One more time? They hadn't mentioned this before. Was this how it always worked, or were they changing the rules? I nodded without hesitation, afraid to show any resistance. "Please, can I have some food?" I requested, my voice small and weak. My stomach had been empty since morning, and I needed strength to endure what was coming next. "Sure, you will have enough," one of the men answered, and tapped my shoulder with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Be a good girl," they said, and left, locking the door behind them. I heard their footsteps fade down the hallway, their laughter growing distant. I was alone again with my thoughts and fears. I curled up on the mattress, hugging my knees to my chest, trying to make myself as small as possible. I felt dirty, used, less than human. I wondered if any amount of money was worth this. Like 2 hours later, my room was opened and another girl was brought in to stay with me. The sight of her made me gasp. Her name was Precious, she told me later, but there was nothing precious about how they treated her. She was being handled like a slave. Big chains were on her wrists and ankles, the metal cutting into her skin where she had struggled against them. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen nearly shut, her lips split and crusted with dried blood. The guards pushed her roughly into the room, making her stumble and fall to her knees. They didn't even look at me as they locked the door again. When the house guards left, I moved closer to her, wanting to help but afraid to touch her. "What was your crime?" I asked softly. She looked at me with her one good eye, studying my face before responding. "What are you doing here?" she asked instead. "What are you doing in the dog's family?" Her voice was hoarse, as if she had been screaming or hadn't used it in a long time. I couldn't answer her question. I just stared at her, taking in the cuts and bruises that covered her visible skin. She looked like she had been beaten repeatedly over many days. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her hair matted with something that might have been blood. "I know what you're doing here," she continued when I didn't answer. "You came to sleep with dogs and get paid plenty of money. But you're wrong. This place is more dangerous than anything in this world. You will regret the day you chose to make business with the dogs." Precious said to me, her voice low and urgent. This was the second time someone had warned me about these men. The fear growing inside me now felt more real, more immediate. The guard's warning and now this girl's. They couldn't both be lying. "Look at me," she said, raising her chained hands. "They did this to me. They put these chains on me. They treat me like a slave. When I found out about them, I tried to escape, but they went after me. You cannot leave this business once you enter. You'll think you're making money, but no, they are using you to make money instead." Her words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Using me? How? I thought they were just rich men with strange desires who paid for their entertainment. But Precious was suggesting something else, something worse, something that explained why they would chain a girl and beat her for trying to leave, something that explained why they might be recording what happened in these rooms. My mind raced with terrible possibilities, each one worse than the last. "We should report them to the police," I suggested, my voice shaking. "They can't keep doing this to so many people." But Precious just laughed, a hollow sound with no humour in it. Her laugh turned into a cough, and she winced in pain, holding her side as if her ribs were broken. "The police," she said when she could speak again. "People work with the police. The police are compromised, and they will never believe your statement with no evidence. Just take this advice, keep working with them, and behave like you don't know anything about their secret, because once they find out that you know something about them, they'll lock you up forever and keep using you to do their secret job." Secret job? What secret job? What were these men really doing? Were they filming these encounters to sell? Were they blackmailing girls afterward? Were they involved in something even worse that I couldn't imagine? I was about to ask Precious more questions, to beg her to tell me everything she knew so I could understand what I had gotten myself into, but the door opened before I could speak. It was the house guards again, pushing a tray of food into the room before quickly locking the door again. While I was eating the simple meal they had provided, just bread and soup that didn't taste quite right, the door opened again. This time several men came in, dragging dogs on leashes. My heart sank as I realized what was about to happen. But they didn't come for me. They went straight to Precious. Right before my eyes, they forced the dogs upon her, even though she was in chains. She fought against them, screaming and trying to kick the men away, but her restraints limited her movement. They held her down easily, 4 strong men against one weakened woman. "No, please," she begged. "Not again. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good." But they ignored her pleas, treating her cries as if they were nothing more than background noise. "Eat your food," one of the rich men said to me, noticing that I had stopped eating to watch in horror. "She was stubborn, and that's why she's facing such treatment. Just be friendly, and you won't have to go through what she is going through." His casual tone while such violence was happening made me feel sick. I couldn't eat another bite, but I pretended to, afraid of what they might do if I showed my disgust or fear too openly. Precious was struggling with them, but they held her down firmly, and that was when I saw them do something that made everything suddenly horribly clear. They brought out cameras, expensive, professional-looking equipment, and began filming the scene. They recorded everything that the dog was doing to Precious, adjusting angles, checking lighting, directing the action, as if they were making a movie. I was shocked into stillness, my mind trying to reject what my eyes were seeing. They were making videos. They were creating content to sell. This wasn't just about rich men with strange desires. This was a business, an illegal, horrible business that profited from the suffering of women like Precious and me. The realization hit me like a flood of ice water. The men weren't paying us because they wanted to watch their dogs with women. They were paying us because they could make much more money selling videos of these acts to people around the world. That's why they needed new girls constantly. That's why they couldn't let anyone leave who knew what they were really doing. That's why the guard had warned me. That's why Precious was in chains. The food in my mouth turned to ash, and I struggled not to vomit as I finally understood the true nature of the dog family business. As I watched, unable to look away from Precious's suffering, my mind was already racing ahead. I had to get out of here. I had to escape. But how? They wouldn't just let me walk away now that I had seen this. Even if they paid me today and let me go, they would be watching me. And if they ever suspected I might talk, I would end up like Precious. Or worse. I needed a plan. I needed help. The guard who had warned me, could he help? Would he? Was there anyone I could trust in this house of horrors? I forced myself to keep eating, to look calm, to not draw attention to myself. I couldn't let them see that I understood what was happening now. I couldn't let them know that I was already planning my escape. I would have to be smart. I would have to be patient. I would have to pretend to be exactly what they wanted. A desperate girl willing to do anything for money, too naive to question what was really happening around her. As they continued filming Precious, I made a silent promise to myself and to her. I would find a way out of here. And somehow, someday, I would make these men pay for what they had done to us, and probably many others before us. This wasn't just about saving myself anymore. It was about stopping something evil. I don't know what made you decide to sleep with dogs, but you made the wrong decision. You see how they recorded me while the dogs had their way with me? That's how they will keep using the videos to make money, Precious told me. Her voice kept darting to the door, afraid someone might be listening. The horror of what I had just witnessed was still fresh in my mind. The cameras, the men directing like it was a movie set, Precious's screams that they ignored completely. My hands trembled as I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to stop the shaking. The food they had brought sat untouched now, my appetite completely gone. I couldn't stop thinking about how many other girls had been in this room, how many videos they had made, and how much money they had earned from our suffering. I wondered if the videos of me already existed somewhere, being watched by strangers who paid to see my humiliation. The thought made bile rise in my throat. Then a question occurred to me, something that didn't make sense. But they have never recorded me on camera before, at least not that I saw. Why is my situation different? I asked Precious, hoping there might be some explanation that would give me hope, some reason to believe I could still escape before it was too late. I think maybe you came into the business as a virgin. They don't record virgins, Precious said, her swollen face twisting into what might have been a grimace or might have been a sad smile. I nodded, confirming her guess. Yes, I was. Her eyes widened slightly at my confirmation, and she looked even more worried than before. She leaned closer to me, chains rattling with her movement, and spoke with greater urgency. Then you must find a way to escape. Your situation is more complicated than you know. These men aren't just making illegal videos, they're ritualists. They will not hesitate to use any woman who has never been touched by a man for ritual purposes. Ritualists? The word sent ice through my veins. I had heard stories about such people. Wealthy, powerful men who used human sacrifices in dark ceremonies to increase their wealth and power. I had always thought those were just scary stories to keep young people in line, not something that actually happened in real life. But after what I had seen today, I could believe anything about these men. Their casual cruelty, their complete disregard for human suffering, their obsession with money and power, it all fit the stories I had heard about ritualists who would do anything for more wealth, more influence, more control. Evening came and the dogs returned to do their job with me as they usually did. This time was different though. I knew what these men really were, what they were really doing, Every moment felt like torture, not just physically but mentally. I kept my face blank, trying not to let them see my fear and disgust. I pretended to be just a simple girl who didn't understand anything beyond the money I was being paid. Inside, I was screaming. Inside, I was planning my escape. After it was over, Cynthia came to pick me up from the mansion. I saw the men pay her again, counting out cash and handing it to her with satisfied smiles. Then they whispered something in her ear that I couldn't hear. She nodded, looking serious, and glanced at me with an expression I couldn't read. Was it a concern? Guilt? Or was I just seeing what I wanted to see? Some indication that she wasn't completely part of their evil? I followed Cynthia out of the mansion and into her car. As soon as we were inside and driving away, I couldn't hold back any more. "I will not do this job again," I told her firmly. "I'm done sleeping with dogs." But Cynthia just laughed and kept driving, not taking my declaration seriously. Her laughter felt like a betrayal. I'd thought she was my friend, someone who was helping me make money. Now I wondered if she knew exactly what these men were doing. The videos, the rituals, everything. We got to her house and she gave me the money the men had paid me. "This is 20 million naira. That's your payment for today," she said, pushing the stack of bills toward me across her coffee table. I looked at the money and stood there shocked. The last time they paid me 5 million, and now 20 million. Why so much more? Was it because they knew I had seen too much? Was it a way to keep me quiet, to make me complicit? Or was it because they were planning something worse for me later, something that Precious had warned me about? The money that should have made me happy now filled me with dread. I thought about everything I had heard and seen at the dog's house. There was no way I was risking myself there anymore. The image of Precious treated like a slave, recorded naked, unable to escape, it was burned into my mind. And her warning that they would probably use me for ritual because no man had ever touched me. I also remembered what one of the house guards at the mansion told me. He said the men were more dangerous than they seemed. All these warnings couldn't be ignored. The money wasn't worth my life. "I'm sorry, Cynthia, I can't continue this job," I said firmly. "This money is enough for me already." She smiled and transferred the money to my own account. Then she said goodbye and left me alone with my thoughts and plans. After Cynthia left, I believed I was free. I thought I had finally gotten out of the dog business. I didn't know that Cynthia had been told to watch me carefully. I had no idea there were men following me everywhere I went. In case I decided to travel out of the state or country, I was completely unaware that all these people were watching my every move, reporting back to the dog family. In my ignorance, I felt safe for the first time in days. The weight of 20 million naira in my account gave me confidence. With that much money, I could start a new life somewhere far away from Lagos. I could buy a small house, start a legitimate business, maybe even go back to school. I could become someone respectable, someone with a future that didn't involve degradation and fear. After considering my options carefully, I decided to travel far from home. I would leave Lagos and go to another state to start my life with that money. A place where nobody knew me, where I could reinvent myself and forget the horrible things I had done for money. A place where the dog family couldn't find me. I believed in this plan completely, not knowing how naive I was being, not understanding the reach and resources of the men I was trying to escape from. I called Cynthia and told her I would be leaving. I took Cynthia as a friend. I didn't know she was working with the dog family in ways I hadn't imagined. I trusted her completely, which was my biggest mistake. "I'm going to start fresh somewhere else," I told her. "Thank you for everything you've done for me." She told me to travel safely and wished me well. I appreciated her for what I thought was her support during my hard times. Her warm words and encouragement made me feel even more confident about my decision to leave. I hung up the phone feeling good about my plans, unaware of the betrayal that was already in motion. But Cynthia went behind my back and told her bosses that I was planning to travel to another state. She gave them my exact information. Which bus I would be taking, what time I would leave, what I was wearing, everything they needed to find me. With this information, they launched an ambush, positioning their men to intercept the bus I had boarded. While I sat in that bus, feeling happy and relieved, believing I was finally free from the scary business, they were already closing in on me. I felt sympathy for Precious, knowing she would still be facing bad treatment from them, but I comforted myself with the thought that at least I had escaped. I had no idea that my escape was an illusion, that freedom was still far beyond my reach. I sat in the bus as it moved through the city and onto the highway. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the road ahead. I watched the familiar landmarks of Lagos disappear behind us, feeling a mixture of sadness and hope. I was leaving everything I knew, but I was also leaving behind the nightmare I had fallen into. We came to a part of the highway where cars hardly moved, a remote stretch surrounded by thick forest on both sides, perfect for an ambush. Suddenly, our bus was shot at. The loud bang of the tire exploding made everyone scream. The bus driver couldn't control the speed and he lost access to the steering. We swerved violently off the road and crashed into the thick bush beside the highway. Passengers were thrown from their seats, luggage fell from the overhead compartments, and chaos erupted inside the vehicle. Before anyone could recover from the initial shock, like 6 men emerged from the bush and attacked our bus. They wore masks and carried weapons. They forced their way inside, shoving aside other passengers who were injured and confused. Some people tried to run, but they were quickly caught and beaten. The men moved with purpose, clearly looking for someone specific. Me. The last thing I saw was the men coming toward the back seat where I was sitting, their eyes cold and determined behind their masks. I tried to hide, to make myself small, but there was nowhere to go. One of them grabbed me roughly by the arm, and another pressed something over my face, a cloth that smelled sweet and chemical. Then, everything went black. I opened my eyes again and found myself right back in the dog's house, the very place I had tried so desperately to escape from. My head pounded and my mouth felt dry from whatever drug they had used to knock me out. I was sitting on the floor of the now familiar room, but I wasn't alone. Precious was there too, still in chains but with fresh bruises that hadn't been there before. Had they punished her because of my escape attempt? The guilt of that possibility made me feel sick. "You can't run," a voice said from the doorway. I looked up to see one of the men standing there, watching us with a satisfied smile. "No one leaves the family unless we allow it." His words confirmed everything Precious had told me. Once you were in, there was no getting out. The dog family's reach was far greater than I had imagined. They had connections everywhere, resources to track down anyone who tried to escape. They had been watching me all along, probably laughing at my naive plans to start a new life somewhere else. "What are you going to do with me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The man's smile widened, showing teeth that looked too white, too perfect. "That depends on how cooperative you are," he said. "But don't worry. You're still valuable to us, very valuable indeed." The way he emphasized valuable made my blood run cold. I remembered Precious's warning about rituals, about what they did to virgins. Was that what he meant? Was that why they had brought me back instead of just killing me? I looked at Precious, whose eyes were filled with sympathy and fear. She had tried to warn me, but I hadn't understood the true danger until it was too late. Now we were both trapped here with no hope of escape. "You will keep sleeping with our dogs. You can't escape us. You think we just pay you millions just to please a dog. We actually bought you in full. You belong to the dog family and you can be used for any purpose," one of the rich men said to me, his voice cold and matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather rather than my life. His expensive suit was perfectly pressed, his shoes shined to a mirror finish, all the trappings of respectability hiding the monster underneath. I sat on the floor, still dizzy from whatever drug they had used to knock me out during the ambush. The room spun slightly when I tried to focus on his face. Then I saw someone else standing behind him, a familiar figure that made my heart sink even further. Cynthia. She was standing right at their side, her face expressionless, her expensive handbag clutched in manicured hands. At that moment I realized she had never been my friend. She was never sleeping with dogs herself. She was only bringing people into their trap, like a spider luring flies into its web. All those concerned looks, all that advice about investing my money, all the smiles and encouragement, it had all been part of her job. Her role was to find vulnerable girls, gain their trust, and deliver them to these monsters. I wondered how many others like me she had betrayed, how many lives she had destroyed while counting her commission. "What is causing the delay, Cynthia? We need more girls. They need to be 10 in number before we use them for rituals," I heard the man say to her. His casual mention of rituals confirmed my worst fears. Tears dropped down my face as the full horror of my situation became clear. I could not believe Cynthia had led me to my own death, all in the name of helping me. All those times she had told me about the good money, about how I could change my life, she knew exactly what fate awaited me. She knew I was being fattened like a goat for slaughter, kept content with money until it was time for the sacrifice. "Calm down, boss. I have been trying to get more girls. I need more time," Cynthia replied, her voice professional and detached. She didn't even look at me as she spoke, as if I were already dead to her. Then she turned and left, her high heels clicking on the marble floor as she walked away. The sound echoed in my head like a countdown to my death. They took me back to the room where Precious was waiting, and I realized she had been right all along. The men were more dangerous than they seemed. This wasn't just about making pornographic videos with animals. This was about ritual murder, about sacrificing human lives for wealth and power. The videos were probably just a side business, a way to make money while they gathered enough victims for their real purpose. How can they choose to sacrifice 10 girls just to make money? I asked Precious, my voice breaking with despair. The sheer evil of it was beyond my comprehension. 10 young women with families, with dreams, with futures, all to be slaughtered like animals so these already wealthy men could become even richer. Precious laughed, but there was no humor in the sound, just bitterness and resignation. "People can do anything for money," she said, her chains rattling as she shifted position on the floor. "Maybe this is our own fate. It's their way of making money. They deceive you with money and then later use you to get more money." Her words hit me like a physical blow. Was this really our fate? To die in this house of horrors? Our bodies used in some dark ritual to increase the wealth of men who already had more than they could spend in 10 lifetimes? I couldn't accept it. I wouldn't. "There must be something we can do. We need to escape," I told Precious, desperation making my voice rise. But it seemed she had already given up. The fight had gone out of her after who knows how long in this place. She was ready to be used for anything, no longer afraid of what might happen to her. Perhaps, in her mind, death would be a release from the suffering she had endured. "We can't," she replied flatly. "Look around. This place is guarded by men with guns. Just accept what is coming and enjoy the last minutes you have on Earth." Her resignation was terrifying to witness. How long had she been here to reach this point of complete surrender? How much abuse had she endured before deciding that fighting was pointless? She had given up, but I couldn't. I wouldn't. If I was going to die, it wouldn't be as a passive victim waiting for the knife. I remembered the house guard who had spoken to me before, the one who had warned me about the danger. He had seemed different from the others, like he might have some humanity left in him. Maybe he could help. I decided I had to speak with him again. So I waited for him to serve us food, watching the door anxiously until it finally opened and he appeared with trays. After giving us our meals, I caught his eye, silently pleading for a moment of his time. When Precious was distracted with her food, I whispered urgently, "I need to escape." His eyes darted nervously to the door, checking if anyone was watching. "It will be risky," he murmured, his voice barely audible. His fear was obvious, but I couldn't let this opportunity slip away. "Please help me," I begged. "You're the only person here who truly understands our pain." My words seemed to touch something in him, some remnant of conscience that hadn't been completely smothered by working in this place. He hesitated, conflict clear on his face. "I'm working for them," he said finally. "They might suspect me if I try to help you. He glanced at the door again, his body tense with fear. "But I can only give you one thing if you wish to escape." With trembling hands, he lifted his shirt and pulled out a gun from his waistband. "Everyone in this mansion has this, so you might need it if you wish to escape." He pressed the cold metal into my palm, closing my fingers around it. "But remember, no one ever escapes these people. They will always find you." "His name was Andrei," he told me, before slipping out of the room as quickly as he had come. I stared at the gun in my hand, both terrified and empowered by its weight. I had never held a gun before, never even touched one. I had no idea how to use it properly, but it represented something I desperately needed. A chance, however small, at freedom. I quickly hid it under the small bed in the room, heart pounding with the fear of being discovered with a weapon. Precious sat beside me and kept laughing softly when she saw what I had been given. "There is nothing you can do to escape these people. Don't waste your time," she said, shaking her head at what she clearly thought was a futile plan. Her chains rattled with the movement, a constant reminder of what happened to those who tried to fight back. But I couldn't accept her defeatism, couldn't surrender to the fate these men had planned for me. "I will try," I told her firmly. "Death is better than this," I replied, and carefully made sure the gun was well hidden under the bed, where the guards wouldn't find it during their routine checks of our room. As time went on, the horror of our daily existence continued. They kept giving us to their dogs while they waited for us to complete the group of 10 girls they needed for their ritual. The dogs came every day, sometimes more than once, and the men watched and recorded, building their library of perverse videos to sell while they gathered their sacrificial victims. I endured it all with a mask of submission, pretending to be broken like Precious, but inside I was calculating, planning, waiting for the right moment. My mind stayed focused on the gun hidden under the bed, on the possibility of freedom it represented. I knew I might die in an escape attempt, but that seemed preferable to waiting passively for ritual slaughter. After 2 days, they brought another girl and added her to our group. We became 3 prisoners in the small room, 3 future sacrifices for the men's greed. The new girl was young, maybe even younger than me, with terror in her eyes that reminded me of how I must have looked when I first arrived. She sat in the corner and cried continuously, her body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. I knew she would become used to it soon, as I had. It's normal to cry when you first find yourself in such a situation. The shock, the violation, the horror, it's overwhelming at first. But humans have a terrible capacity to adapt to even the most horrific circumstances. Eventually, the tears stop, not because the pain is gone, but because you've learned to live with it. I didn't tell her about the ritual that awaited us all. What good would it do to add that knowledge to her current suffering? She would learn the truth soon enough. Meanwhile, I continued to plan, to watch the guards' routines, to look for weaknesses in their security. Precious was not interested in my plans because she felt I was wasting my time. But I noticed the new girl watching me sometimes, a spark of hope in her eyes that hadn't yet been extinguished. Every morning, the dogs came to sleep with us, one after the other. I had already gotten used to it, as had Precious. I even made it easier for the dogs to do their thing because I didn't want the men to beat me up like they always did to Precious when she resisted. I had learned that survival sometimes meant submission, that fighting back openly only led to more pain. But my apparent submission was just a mask hiding my determination to escape. Then I heard something that gave me hope. The rich men were going on a short meeting with some of their allies. They would be away from the mansion for several hours, leaving only the guards behind. This might be my only chance. I decided I was going to escape with this opportunity, no matter what it took. When I told Precious my plan, she just shook her head. "You will not be able to do that," she warned. "The house is seriously guarded. Even with the bosses gone, there will be men with guns at every exit." Her warnings were probably wise, but I couldn't listen to them. The alternative, waiting to be sacrificed, was unthinkable. I had to try. I had to fight for my life, for my future. If I died in the attempt, at least I would die free, not as a helpless victim on some ritual altar. I thought of my parents, who had always taught me to be strong, to never give up. I thought of the life I had dreamed of having before poverty drove me into this nightmare. I thought of all the other girls who might fall into this trap if these men weren't stopped. I had to try, not just for myself, but for all of them too.